Today, I wanted to give voice to words written in stone nearly 3 millennia ago, from a civilization which has largely been forgotten. They begin as follows, quote, "Hear of what I did, more than the ancestors. I am a king, divine emanation, living image of Atum, who came forth from the womb, adorned as a ruler, of whom those greater than he were afraid, whose father knew, and whose mother recognized that he would rule the world in the womb. The good God, beloved of the gods, achieving with his hands, Meruman Pianki." Such was the pronouncement of Piye, one of the greatest kings of Nubia, whose conquest would see him reign as the first black pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt. Today, let us listen to his tale. It's been extremely refreshing for me to finally explore African history. I'll admit that sometimes it can be a bit intimidating knowing where to start and how to understand the broader picture of just how everything fits together. Thankfully, our sponsor Blinkist has a solution. Blinkist is an app that makes learning new topics easy by taking thousands of nonfiction books and using experts to distill them down to their most essential ideas for you to easily digest with text or audio in just 15 minutes. It's been a great tool for me when it comes to history as well as the 27 other sections offered by Blinkist. Their This is Africa playlist is a great place to get started. I highly recommend A History of Nigeria, which plots the rise of the continent's most populous country, as well as The Rift, which looks at more modern trends of how Africa is developing into the 21st century. I'm sure that when you try Blinkist, you'll also be able to find more hidden gems of your own. So check it out now by clicking the link in the description below to get a 7-day free trial. In addition, the first 100 people will get 25% off a full membership. Enjoy! The New Kingdom of Egypt represented one of the absolute high water marks of their civilization. Stretching from the southern lands of Nubia all the way up to the northern lands of Syria, it was a remarkably diverse and powerful empire. Yet the greater the ascent, the greater the fall, and after 500 years of unparalleled prosperity, it finally came crashing down. But why did this occur? The real answer would involve a complex series of factors that played out over many centuries. However, the general idea is that the New Kingdom was brought low by the following: environmental conditions such as drought and famine, foreign invasions by forces like the Sea Peoples during the Bronze Age collapse, economic decline and civil unrest resulting from these adverse conditions, turbulent transfers of power across the dynasties, and political fracturing as factions like the High Priests of Thebes capitalized on a weakened central authority. Thus, by the year 1078 BC, Ramses XI would die as the last pharaoh of the New Kingdom. The vultures now descended upon its corpse. The following years would be categorized by later historians as the Third Intermediate Period, a nice academic way to describe what was a rather tumultuous time of widespread upheaval. By the middle of the 8th century BC, the lands of Egypt had disintegrated into local city-states, with a variety of competing powers all vying for supreme control. It will now be worth quickly reviewing these. To the north lay the various kings and princes of the Delta. Those along its east were the lingering remnants of the 22nd and 23rd dynasties. Those along its center were the great chiefs of the Meshwesh, an ancient tribal group. On their flank were the great chiefs of the west, who had seen their noble lineages infused with Libyan blood in recent years. To their south lay the rulers of Heracleopolis, Hermopolis, and Thebes. Around 730 BC, the balance of power would be upset by Tefnakht, the prince of Sais, who formed a new alliance that now threatened to conquer all of Egypt. We actually have reports of these events from observers at the time. I'll now quote our source directly to give you a proper feel for the unfolding drama. Quote, "He has seized the whole west, from the back lands to Ithto, coming southward with a numerous army, while the two lands are united behind him, and the princes and rulers of walled towns are as dogs at his heels. No stronghold has closed its doors in the nomes of the south. Meratum, Persa Kemper, the Temple of Sebek, Permazed, Teknesh, and every city of the west, they have opened the doors for fear of him. He turned to the east, they opened to him likewise, Hatbenu, Tozi, Hatseni, and Pernebtith. Behold, he besieges Heracleopolis, he has completely invested it, not letting comers out come out, and not letting goers in go in, fighting every day. He measured it off in its whole circuit, every prince knows his wall." The monarch who received this alarming report was King Piye of Nubia. But rather than cower in fear, he is said to have laughed with a courageous and joyous heart. So who was this man, and why did he have such a reaction? The lands of Nubia had long been entwined with the affairs of Egypt. In fact, the ascent of the New Kingdom had meant that their lands up to the Fourth Cataract had been directly ruled by the pharaohs of the north. During this period, there would be a great cultural mixing. Many powerful families intermarried, while young Nubian nobles were often sent to Thebes, where they learned Egyptian writing, science, and religion. Such was the degree of integration that when the New Kingdom receded, the Nubians would take up the mantle as the preservers of ancient Egyptian tradition. Thus the Kingdom of Nubia at Napata was able to exert its control over the southern Nile, maintaining garrisons in Upper Egypt and installing their princess as the high priestess of Amun in Thebes. Piye was the eldest brother of that princess, and eventually ascended to the throne around 750 BC. His early reign was occupied by various moves meant to consolidate power and eliminate internal threats. As had been the case throughout the history of Nubia though, nothing worked better in this regard than a proper spear rattling. Thus it came as welcome news to Piye when the northern princes sent envoys pleading that he do something to halt the unstoppable army of Tefnakht. The ruler would certainly answer their calls, but he also had ambitious dreams of what such a campaign could accomplish. According to our records, the offensive began with a vanguard force. Messages were sent by Piye to his two commanders currently stationed in Egypt. Their orders were as follows. Quote, "Hasten into battle order, engage in combat, surround the foe, capture its people and its cattle, its ships upon the river. Let not the peasants go forth to the field, let not the plowmen plow, beset the frontier of the Hare Nome, fight against it daily. Yoke the war horses, the best of thy stable, draw up the battle line, thou knowest that Amun is the god who has sent us." This was quite the rallying cry to inspire the men. However, Piye knew that he also had to prepare his army on a metaphysical level. There were therefore additional orders given that they were to head for Thebes and conduct purifying rituals at the temple of Amun, honoring the gods. Thereafter, the whole force was to bow before the commanders and pledge itself to Piye. With these steps taken, the war could begin. Now, a powerful fleet was amassed on the Nile and sailed downstream with the rest of the Nubian army marching at its side. Together, they forged a path ahead. Let's now return to our sources. Quote, "Our men sailed downstream upon the river. Thence they found many ships coming upstreams bearing soldiers, sailors, and commanders, every valiant man of the Northland, equipped with weapons of war, to fight against the army of his majesty. Then there was made a great slaughter among them, whose number was unknown. Their troops and their ships were captured and brought as living captives to the place where his majesty was. Our force then went to the frontier of Heracleopolis, demanding battle. Our army went forth against theirs. Then they made a great slaughter among them, greater than anything. Their ships were captured upon the river. The remnant crossed over and landed on the west side before Perpeg. When the land brightened early in the morning, the army of his majesty crossed over against them. Army mingled with army, they slew a multitude of people among them. Horses of unknown number, a rout ensued among the remnant. The foe fled to the northland." These had been great victories, which secured the lands of the Upper Nile, bringing the Nubians to the doorstep of the Delta. It was certainly an accomplishment worth celebrating. However, upon hearing reports of his vanguard, King Piye roared in anger like a panther, saying, quote, "Have they allowed a remnant of the army of the Northland to remain? Have they allowed the chiefs to go forth to tell of his campaign? Have they not caused their death in order to destroy the last of them? I swear, as Re loves me, I will myself go northward that I may destroy that which the enemy has done, that I may make him turn back from fighting forever." Thus, just before the new year, King Piye now made his way towards the army. He would stop in Thebes to attend the feast of Opet and make offerings to the gods. At the news of his coming, the Nubians redoubled their efforts. Quote, "When the army which was there in Egypt heard of the wrath which his majesty felt towards them, they fought against Permazed of the Octhracite Nome. They took it like a flood of water, and they sent word to his majesty, but his heart was not satisfied. Then they fought against Tetehen, great in might. They found it filled with soldiers, with every valiant man of the Northland. Then the battering ram was employed against it, its wall was overthrown, and a great slaughter was made among them, of unknown number, but also the son of Tefnakht. Then they sent word to his majesty, but his heart was not satisfied. So they fought against Hatbenu, its interior was breached, the army of his majesty entered it. They sent word to his majesty, but his heart was still not satisfied. Finally, however, the king of impossibly high standards arrived to take control himself. He marched immediately upon Hermopolis, besieging it with full force. An embankment was erected to encircle the city, while the fleet cut off supplies from the Nile. Slingers and bowmen were brought forth, and a tower was erected to suppress the enemy with projectiles. For days, the defenders were showered in missiles, their unburied dead creating a miasma so strong it carried to the lines of the besieger. Soon, Hermopolis would beg for mercy. This string of victories, combined with the presence of the great king, convinced many that the tides of war were changing. Now, as the invincible Nubian army advanced, the gates of cities were flung open to them. That is, until they had reached the mighty walls of Memphis. This great city was a formidable bastion of the Nile, which had recently been bolstered by an elite group of 8,000 soldiers sent by Tefnakht. Though we know little about the actual details of its defenses at this time, we can get an idea by turning to other fortresses of the period. These feature massive mud brick walls some 10 to 20 meters tall, with towers and additional outer barricades and ditches meant to prevent enemies from advancing with siege equipment to undermine the main defenses. Even if an opening was found in the perimeter, there would be courtyards with narrow killing fields and additional citadels to further protect the interior. Storming Memphis would be no simple task. This was further complicated by recent flooding of the Nile, which left much of the surrounding countryside inundated. The Nubian generals struggled to devise a plan of attack. Some wished to carry out a siege with massive engineered causeways, bridges, and towers. However, King Piye was furious at this dithering and boldly announced that he would take the city like the flood that had taken the land. To achieve this, he amassed every ship in the region, fishing boats, ferries, transport barges, warships, anything that could float. These were crammed full of troops. The makeshift armada now allowed the army to walk on water. And so it advanced upon Memphis in a multi-pronged assault, with King Piye crying out, quote, "Forward against it! Mount the walls! Penetrate the houses over the river! If one of you gets through upon the wall, let him not halt before it, so that the foe may not repulse you." Thus, the Nubian force became the flood which washed over Memphis. It wreaked bloody carnage upon the city, as the great king made an example of their resistance, slaughtering a multitude of people. However, Piye also proved that he could be more than a rampaging brute. The next day, having made his point, he played the part of the righteous and pious ruler. Guards were posted to protect the city temples, and priests were dispersed to cleanse all of Memphis. Seeing this, all cities in the region quickly bent their knee to the conqueror from the south. King Piye made a grand showing of accepting tributes of gold and silver, but devoting the best of these to the gods. Records tell of a marathon of holy rituals taking place in the span of a few weeks. This was a brilliant geopolitical move meant to assure the Egyptians that he was not some savage pagan foreigner, but the very embodiment of the perfect pharaoh. It seems to have had a great effect. Our records state, quote, "Then came those kings and princes of the Northland, all the chiefs who wore the feather, every vizier, all chiefs, and every king's confidant, from the west, from the east, and from the islands in the midst, to see the beauty of his majesty." Heaps of treasure were laid at the feet of a triumphant King Piye. His supremacy was evident to all. Even the foe Tefnakht knew that there would be no hope in resistance. He too bent the knee, paying tribute and swearing an oath of loyalty to the first Nubian pharaoh. Thus began the 25th dynasty. The victors now established their rule over the entirety of the Nile, a feat not accomplished since the glorious days of the New Kingdom. According to our sources, quote, "Then the ships were laden with silver, gold, copper, clothing, and everything of the Northland, every product of Syria, and all sweet woods of God's lands. His Majesty sailed upstream with glad heart, the shores on either side were jubilating, west and east rejoicing in the presence of His Majesty, singing and cheering as they said, 'O mighty, mighty ruler Pianki, O mighty ruler, thou comest having gained the dominion of the Northland, thou makest bulls into women. Happy the heart of the mother who bore thee, and the man who begat thee. Those who are in the valley give to her praise, the cow that hath borne a bull. Thou art unto eternity, thy mighty endureth, O ruler beloved of Thebes.'" Thus, in the 21st year of his reign, King Piye finally returned to his capital of Napata with honors greater than any his ancestors could have dreamed of. Great celebrations were had, and praise was given to the gods for this glorious moment. These culminated in the erection of a victory stela at the Temple of Amun, at the holy site of Jebel Barkal. Written 2,700 years ago, it was finally unearthed in 1862, revealing the amazing story we have just recounted. It's been my absolute pleasure to bring this forgotten tale to life, and hope that it gives you a greater appreciation for the all too often overlooked achievements of the Nubian civilization. A huge thanks to the patrons for funding the channel, and to the researchers, writers, and artists who made this episode possible. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related episodes. See you in the next one.